There we go, there we go. You guys can probably see your bulletin a little bit better now. You can see me, but I can't see you. That's not good. That's full creeper status, so. Well, welcome to 155. My name is Brandon Keller. I am the youth director here. If you do not know who I am, I'm the guy doing this. So, just want to talk to you guys tonight about kind of this series we are working in called Tensions. Before I get started, we have a little connection card inside your bulletin there. It allows you to follow along with the message tonight, and you can be able to see what's going on in your bulletin there, do some fill-ins. And on your connection card, if you go ahead and put your name and either a phone number or an email address or something, that would be fantastic, just so we know you are here. And then on the back of that, there's some next steps that we're going to talk about at the end of the message. So if everybody just kind of make sure they have that connection card ready to go, we'll be good. Before I get started, I want to let you guys know about a cool event that's coming up called Pump It Up. Pump It Up is on July 26th. That's like 2 or 3 Saturdays from now, something like that. And who here's worked at Pump It Up before? Raise your hand. Okay, so a good number of you. So, something different for Pump It Up this year. We're going to do it at 2 different gas stations at the same time. So, we'll be having Pump It Up, which is where our church goes out and buys down the price of gas by 50 cents a gallon to invite people to come check out our church and get to know us and everything. And so, what we're looking for is a bunch of teenage volunteers to come to Pump It Up and just have a good time and just kind of bring some life to the party, right? Because we need some life at the party. So, we'll be doing it at the Shell station across the street, and we will also be doing it at the BP station where the Taco Bell is. Everybody knows where the Taco Bell is? Raise your hand if you know. Yes. You know where the Taco Bell is, so yes, you want to go work at the one at the BP station where the Taco Bell is. Get you some bean burrito in between waving at cars. So, all right, so before we get started, I want you to look to the person to your right or your left and say, "Hi, my name is," and tell them what your name is. Thank you. I don't want you sitting next to a stranger all night. That would be really odd, just sitting next to somebody you've never met just like that whole time. Okay, your name isn't that long. Shush, shush. So tonight we're going to be talking about tension, and tonight's our 5th week talking about tension. And what the tension series is all about is really trying to find what I've been calling kind of that sweet spot in the middle between kind of what you would think of as 2 decisions. So some of the things we've talked about already in the series is grace versus truth, and kind of what that looks like between, you know, showing grace or needing absolute truth in a matter. We've also talked about hanging out with friends and whether you should hang out with Christian friends or non-Christian friends. Jesse did a great job explaining that to us, and how you really need both. You can't just say, I'm only going to hang out with Christians or non-Christians. You really need both of those in your life. And then we also talked about confidence versus humility and how you need to find that middle ground between having lots of confidence and lots of humility, and somewhere in the middle there. And then last week, Jesse also talked about the tension between obeying God and obeying your parents. And that one was a little tense since it's tension, get it? And really the big one for me was her walkaway point kind of ouched me because, you know, I didn't grow up as a Christian, so I can look back on my past and go, wow, I definitely wasn't doing things right. But it was, her walkaway point, in case you guys missed it, was if I have a problem obeying my parents, I don't have a problem with my parents, I have a problem with God. And that was definitely an ouch moment for me of every time I was disobedient towards my parents, it was really me being disobedient towards God and kind of how that works. So if you guys missed any of the last 4 weeks, you can go watch those on YouTube. They're easy to find. Just go to 155 Ministries. You can watch all of those. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about justice versus mercy. And this one can get a little bit hard to understand also because there's such a weird middle ground between justice and mercy. And this is what I found when I'm looking at justice versus mercy. When somebody does a wrong against you, you want justice. You want something to happen for, you know, they committed a wrong against you. You demand justice, right? That's kind of how that works. But when you do a wrong against somebody else, you usually ask for mercy in that case. You don't want the justice if you did the wrong. You want mercy in that case. So I find usually when we're talking about justice and mercy, it really depends on what side of the coin you're on, depends on which one you're a fan of at the time. So, number one on your outline to get started says God loves justice. God loves justice. And so the definition of justice is fairness or reasonableness, especially in the way people are treated or decisions are made. So it's really about that fair. Everything needs to be fair, right? I mean, as a culture, we've gone a little bit too far with the fair thing, but that's really what it's about, is that, justice means that, for every right there's a wrong, and things are kind of fixed that way. And so most people want to see justice served, but the problem we usually have as humans is that we want to determine what that justice is. We want to decide what is justice, because if somebody gets, kills your parents, what you consider justice and what the courts consider justice are two totally different things, right? The courts may go, oh, that guy deserves 10 years in prison. You're going, whoa, 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 whoa. He deserves way more than that, right? Public flogging, something bigger than just, whatever the justice system cited. So justice is hard because it's usually a deciding thing of what do you consider justice. And then you really got to be careful, because a lot of times justice falls into the scope of revenge. Anybody like revenge? Yes, yes. Justice, a lot of times, if you're not careful, it turns into a revenge thing where you're just trying to get back at somebody. So when I think of justice, I think of a couple things. I think of the courts, right, where you go before a judge and they decide, what happens. They bring a criminal to justice. In the Bible, in Exodus, they talk about an eye for an eye, a hand for a hand, a bruise for a bruise, a wound for a wound. Now that's that whole payback type justice where, oh, you poke out my eyeball, I'm going to poke out your eyeball too. And so everybody's definition of what justice is a little bit different. And so what we have to be careful of is what we consider justice. And so as I was kind of looking for examples to talk about justice, I started thinking about movies. And you know what I noticed? Pretty much every movie on the planet has some little plot that has to do with justice. There's this great wrong that is done, and this other group that must somehow find a way to bring justice to the situation. And pretty much any movie you can think of, there's some sort of justice that happens right at the end. The bad guy dies, and Bruce Willis shoots the guy up, or whatever it is, or the guy finally gets the girl. It's that some sort of justice happens. And so as I looked across all these movies, I'm like, every one of these has a great example of justice. So like, at the end of Lord of the Rings, Gollum falls into the lava in the Mount Doom, right? At the end of Avengers, Loki gets taken back with Thor so he can face justice on his own planet. Magneto always gets whipped by the X-Men no matter what he tries to do. He always kind of gets beat up. The Jedi defeat the Sith. I mean, there's all the time, it's always non-stop, right? I mean, Harry Potter finally defeats Lord Voldemort. I mean, all that stuff. I know, right? I just ruined the movie, sorry. So, if you haven't seen all 8, I apologize now. You should have read the books. All right, so, but this is what I'm saying. Every movie you can think of has some sort of justice. And that's what gets you involved in the movie, is that you feel for the character, because you're going, there's this thing that's going on, and there's this problem, and there's this wrong happening, and then the hero kind of solves it with justice. And it doesn't always have to be totally, somebody dying or the evil criminal getting hurt. Sometimes it can just be little things that, sometimes maybe you feel cheated, and you need to find a way to kind of bring justice. And when I think of being cheated and bringing justice, this clip comes to mind. So go ahead and watch this clip.
You gotta let us play for it.
No. Come on! How much for the fluffy unicorn?
Well, it is not for sale, but all you gotta do to win it is knock down that little spaceship there. It's easy.
What was that? She hit that. I saw that with my own eyes.
Hey, buddy, let me explain something to you. You see that little tin spaceship? You see how it's not knocked over? Do you know what that means, Professor? It means you don't get the unicorn. Oh! Uh-oh, somebody's got a frowny face. Ooh, better luck next time.
Okay, my turn.
Super serious, right? It can be as easy as just blowing up the carnival games. And if you ever played a game at Six Flags, you've had that feeling before where you're like, there's got to be a way to win this game. I want the big fluffy bear that I have to carry around the rest of the day. It's going to be terrible. So I thought that would be a good example of kind of, you know, what it looks like. So let's look at what the Bible kind of says about justice and what God says about justice. In Isaiah it says, "For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing." So pretty clear, God says, hey, I love justice. I'm all about making sure that things are fair and making sure things happen. So let's just talk about the other side of the coin now as far as mercy, because we're talking about justice versus mercy. So the definition of mercy on your outline is compassion, kindness, or forgiveness shown especially to someone a person has power over. And I think mercy is, and I'm going to focus more on mercy tonight than justice, is because I think mercy is something that's very hard to do. Mercy is something that's very difficult, and I think it's just our human nature that it's my instinct, it feels like, to not show mercy to somebody. And I don't know if it's a revenge thing or an ego thing, but does anybody else struggle with showing people mercy? When you've been wrong, you don't want to show them mercy? You want to get even? So Micah 6:8 says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." To love mercy, not just perform mercy every once in a while when it's convenient. You actually have to love mercy. That is difficult. That is so difficult because it just goes against our human nature to love mercy, it feels like. And the funny thing is when I was looking for great examples of mercy, there's not a lot of great examples of mercy outside the Bible. Like from our culture today, you don't see a ton of huge examples of mercy going on outside of just, you know, what you might find in the Bible or, you know, Proverbs or anything like that is just trying to understand, you know, what mercy looks like today. And so, as I was thinking about mercy and reading this verse, something that occurred to me is that the more humble you are, as it says, walk humbly with your God, the more humble you are, the easier it is to show mercy. And I think it's just because it's that ego thing like I talked about, and because if you're humble, if you show mercy, showing mercy usually means kind of giving up power over something. Like, you know, if you owe somebody back something, like, you know, they hit you, you're waiting to hit them back, it feels like you have power over them because any minute I could hit them back. But giving that up and being humble is releasing that power you feel like you have. And so usually my own ego usually won't let me handle that, right? If somebody comes up and punches me, I usually want to punch them back, right? I mean, that's kind of what happens. It's that eye for an eye thing. I don't always. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But it's hard not to. And so showing mercy also, along with humility, takes a lot of maturity. Because you have to be mature enough to realize that you don't have to seek justice. And usually we get so emotional about getting justice that we forget, or seeking revenge that we forget we don't have to seek justice. We can just kind of let things slide and let there be mercy. So let me tell you a little story about mercy versus justice, and this is my real life story from just a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago, I'm with my family, and we are driving home from Lauren Williams' graduation. She graduated, and so we went to her graduation. And we were driving home, and everything's fine. We're just driving home, talking to the family, whatever, listening to music, whatever we were doing in the car. And then all of a sudden, the most dreaded thing happened. I mean, one of those things that just makes your heart just stop no matter what happens. It was the huge blue lights in my rearview mirror of the cop right behind me with his blue lights on. And for some reason that, I mean, I don't know if everybody else shares that same thing. If you've ever been pulled over, it is like the most terrifying thing. Even if, you know, I feel like I'm a murderer all of a sudden or some reason. It's like, I know I wasn't doing anything too massive long, but I am like terrified that these blue lights are all of a sudden in my rearview mirror. And so I pull over, I'm right over here on Asa Mosley Road, and I pull over, and the cop comes up, and he is the nicest guy I've ever seen as a cop. I mean, so friendly, and was kind of just being so friendly. It was kind of weird. And he's like, well, you know, I pulled you over because you were speeding, and I don't remember exactly how fast I was going, but I was definitely speeding. And so I knew I was speeding, right? And I mean, so usually my gut instinct at this point is to beg for mercy. It's like, please don't give me a ticket. Can I please just get a warning? Because there's a rumor that eventually cops sometimes give warnings. It doesn't happen very often. It's like seeing a unicorn. But sometimes cops give warnings. And so I'm thinking, I need to beg this guy for a warning because I don't need a ticket because it's going to be a hassle. I have to go to court, and then I have to pay a fine. I just don't need a ticket. So I'm just going to kind of beg for mercy. But then I realized, I'm like, you know what? I was speeding. I know I was speeding. The guy was actually nice and wrote the ticket for less than what I was supposed to get because he was a nice guy. He didn't want me to get like the super speeder thing. And so I decided at that point it was easier just to kind of accept the justice of the situation. I could have begged for mercy, and sometimes the cops will show you mercy, but sometimes they won't. But at that point, I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to face the music and accept the justice of the fact that I just got a $100 ticket for driving too fast on Asa Mosley Road. And so sometimes you'll get off with a warning and you get mercy, but sometimes you get justice. And so you got to be careful of where you find your spot in there. And I can tell you guys as teenagers, a lot of you are driving now or going to be driving soon, doing a lot of reading on kind of what happens to teenagers when they get tickets. It's like real bad. Like if you get a super speeder ticket, which is like, I think like 16 miles an hour or something like that, 21 maybe, over the speed limit, they can essentially just take your license away for a year. I mean, no questions asked. If you're under 18, your license is just gone. So all that freedom you thought you had is now gone. Out after probation, gone. They just take it away, period. And so if you're out there doing things maybe you shouldn't be doing in your car, or driving later than you should, or have people in your car you shouldn't, don't think you're going to get mercy every single time and think that, you know, oh, I'm a cute young girl, I'll get out of a ticket. Probably won't work every time. So be careful. Know that justice is coming. If you're breaking the law, justice will usually get you. So be careful about that. So sometimes people will show you mercy. Sometimes you'll face justice, and the same goes for you. Sometimes you're going to show somebody mercy, and sometimes you're going to seek justice from somebody else. And so I'm going to read this huge long verse to you now in Luke 6. And it's really the story of Jesus trying to explain how to be merciful towards others. So it goes like this, and it's not in your outline, so I think some of it will be on the screen, but you can try to follow along. And it says, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you." Now that's difficult to do. I have a hard time praying for those that mistreat me. "If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also." I don't think that's going to be a tough one. Also, probably. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. So if somebody steals your coat, go ahead and pull off your shirt and give that to them too, because that's the right thing to do. If someone's blah, 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 give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. Ever lent money to somebody you knew you were never getting that money back? Yes. I've lent that money before. And it says, but love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Now, obviously, it's going to be really hard to do everything on this list. I know if somebody punches me in the face, I'm probably not going to turn the other cheek and let them punch me in the other side of my face. But great example of how to be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. And when he's talking about your Father, he's obviously talking about God. And so, being merciful means being more like God. And so, God loves mercy and justice, is kind of what we've talked about now. And so, where do we land? Where do we land in the middle of that? Do we show mercy or do we require justice when something happens? So maybe you're kind of looking around at the world and wondering about things going on, and you're like, now wait a second, God, if you love mercy and justice, why do we have kids being abused by parents? Why do we have teenage girls being abducted for human trafficking? Why do we have innocent people being killed? Criminals going free, and you're going, God, that's not fair. There's no justice in that. There's no justice in all these totally terrible things happening. And so for that, I think you need to understand tonight's walk-away point there in your bulletin. It's God's not finished. God's not finished. I'm going to show you a quick clip from this movie also called True Grit. And the story kind of goes like this. A girl decides she needs to kind of seek justice, and I won't ruin it. She'll explain what happens. So if you guys can go ahead and fire that clip.
People did not give it credence that a young girl could leave home and go off in the wintertime to avenge her father's blood, but it did happen. I was just 14 years of age when a coward by the name of Tom Cheney shot my father down and robbed him of his life and his horse and 2 California gold pieces that he carried in his trouser band. Cheney was a hired man, and Papa had taken him up to Fort Smith to help lead back a string of Mustang ponies he had bought. In town, Cheney had fallen to drink and cards and lost all his money. He got it into his head he was being cheated and went back to the boarding house for his Henry rifle. When Papa tried to intervene, Cheney shot him. Cheney fled. He could have walked his horse, for not a soul in that city could be bothered to give chase. No doubt Cheney fancied himself scot-free, but he was wrong. You must pay for everything in this world one way or another. There is nothing free except the grace of God.
So kind of a good little example of, she's telling the story of, her father being shot and killed, and she has to believe that, nothing in this world is free. You're not going to get away with anything, and eventually God's justice will be done. And the only thing she says is free is God's grace. And so you have to believe as you're looking around and you're seeing all these things that maybe, it doesn't seem fair. There is no justice. There is no mercy. You have to believe that God's not finished. And you have to have faith in that. And that's the important part, is having the faith to realize that God is not finished. And all the bad things that are happening in the world, God will make those right. It may not be when you can see them or if you're able to witness it, but God will make those things right. You just have to have faith. In Romans 12 it says, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord." So God is saying, don't worry about seeking revenge. I'll take care of it. In the end, I will take care of everything that's going on. So that kid you saw cheating in class and still got an A, and you're like, dude, I studied for like 3 days and I only got a B. They cheated and got an A. What's up with that? Don't worry. One day that kid's going to have to stand before God and explain why he cheated on that test. And so, as all these things that are going on in your life, know that you don't have to be the one that always shows the mercy or the justice, because God can do that, and He will do that. You have to have that faith that He will do that. So let me ask you this. If everybody's going to stand before God someday and be judged, how is God going to judge you? Is He going to judge you that you were merciful, or that you seek justice and revenge all the time? What is that book when He opens the book of life and talks about your life? Is He going to show that you did justice or mercy, or somewhere right in the middle there, in between? Because let me tell you, according to everything we do, because we're sinners, we deserve the worst. But God's going to show mercy on us, because just like Romans said, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. So to sum it up tonight, I probably try to sum up this whole message in just a couple of lines here. I would say it takes a stronger person to show mercy than it does to seek justice. You have to be strong to show mercy rather than try to seek justice. And you have to have faith that God is not finished. Absolute faith that God is not finished. So on the back of your connection card, we had some next steps I talked about at the beginning of the message. And the first one of those is, you want to check that box if you're going to try to show mercy even though it's hard to do. And that may be showing mercy to your little brother or sister because they just annoy you and you want to punch them, or whatever it is. You want to try to show mercy even though it's hard to do. Or maybe the next one is that you're going to trust that God's not done. And no matter what happens in life, you're not going to try to solve it yourself. You're going to trust and have faith that God's not done. Or maybe the last one is this whole thing's new to you, but you realize you need God in your life because you need that mercy, because maybe you've done some things you shouldn't have done. You need that mercy that God can give you. And maybe you need to ask Jesus into your heart for the first time. And you can do that tonight too by just letting Him know that you're a sinner and you just need Him in your life. So I'm going to go ahead and bow my head in prayer. If you guys will too, we'll close this out and let the band come up. God, thank You for tonight that we can just come and talk openly about mercy and justice, God. It is so difficult to find that middle ground between mercy and justice, and we're just so thankful that we have You as the example, God. If we just follow Your lead, we can have that mercy and justice and find that sweet spot in the middle. And if there's any students here tonight, God, that are struggling with letting something go because they feel like they need that justice, or they're unwilling to show mercy, God, let that just sink into their heart tonight, God, that they need to let that go, that they can just forgive and not worry about seeking justice, and have faith that God is not done and that He will finish everything for us. God, thank You for this great youth group and this great time we're able to have tonight. In Your name we pray. Amen. Come on and worship the name.